of all of the sports organizations in Arizona together. It started off Little League, basketball, volleyball, junior golf, Arizona Sports and Entertainment Commission, AYSO, softball, hockey, you name them. We all got together on a call because what we were trying to do was kind of create a standard in which we could figure this thing out, what return to play looked like once the governor decided to open things up. Now, the challenge with what the governor did was he basically came out and said, hey guys, go play ball. So that really undermined a lot of the work and the time we had put in to provide a governor with a direction. And with the endorsement of 140 Little Leagues, Arizona Basketball Coaches Association, all of the other sports, they went straight to full play. They said, hey, look, Rick, this is great. We'd love to do that, but our groups, they want to go play tournaments. They want to go do things. And off they went. That was in May. We stayed true to our return to play phases. Now, this has all been developed in partnership with the clubs. Since the first week of April, we've met with club DOCs every single week without fail. I've met with presidents at least four or five times over the last number of months, going through each one of these return to play phases, what we were doing, how it was going to be enforced, how we wanted things to be done, accountability that people wanted to see, how we were going to enforce it. So this return to play phases, you'll see today, you guys, we picked a great day to start. Effective today, we announced phase 4, which is our return to play, which was intended originally to be full return to play. Obviously, conditions have changed. So as part of returning to play, what we've also done, if you haven't seen the announcement yet, is we've created a 3-step process to returning to play. Again, trying to make sure we're strong community leaders. We are going to start off in step 1 of the return to play. And what you'll see here in step 1, no spectators. Now, keep in mind, there's a couple. One, the most infected age group in Arizona is the 20 to 44-year-old age group, which is the highest percentage of our parents. The other issue we're having with no spectators, and the reason why we're going with no spectators, is a lot of our facilities that we have let us know that per the governor's executive order, you can't have more than 50 people at a single event. And they're considering each full-size field an event. So if you look at a roster, and if each team has 15 players, there's 30. Each team has 2 coaches, there's 34. Add 3 referees, there's 37. Well, how do you decide, and who gets to decide what other 13 people get to come to the game and on which team? Now, if you go even farther, if you have the older ages, you may have 2 full rosters of 18, there's 36. If each team has a full complement of 4 team officials, coaches, and team managers, that 36 now becomes plus 8 becomes 44, 3 officials becomes 47. This week when you go to the game, only 3 people get to be there. There's no way for us to manage these numbers. So we're going to start off with no spectators. I also believe this is the right thing to do based on our ability to control the spread and show the community that we're committed to the kids playing soccer, not just trying to, get everybody on the field. Other requirements, and these requirements that you'll see here for everything below coaches is the same across all the phases or all the steps. So coaches and team officials will be required to wear masks all the time. They'll also be responsible for ensuring adherence to all of the requirements. So that's a big thing that we're going to do. We have to make sure that everybody's involved in the solution, not the problem. So coaches and team officials will take that lead. Players will be required to wear their masks to and from the field and when they are not playing, which means if they're on the bench, they should have a mask. Now, again, let's be very, very thoughtful here. We live in Arizona. It's hot. A kid gets substituted out. There's no expectation he or she's just going to put their mask on. So what they should be able to do is go to a space away from the rest of the team, be able to get themselves kind of settled down, get cooled down to whatever degree that can be done. And when they come back over towards the bench area, they can put their mask on. So there's got to be a lot of pragmatic thought. Team and parents and spectator seating. Teams will sit on opposite sides of the field from everybody. These are the ASA managed leagues. The team will sit behind the assistant referee. Once we get to where we have spectators again, the spectators will sit on the opposite half of the field from their team and away from the assistant referee. This is a kind of a change for a lot of folks, because before we had the team sit on the same side and parents sit on the opposite side. Quite frankly, guys, we have way too many issues to deal with parents, and we wind up having to break up too many fights, and there's too many challenges with that. So we're putting teams and parents on the same side of the field. Referees have directions as well, maintaining 6 feet when the game's not being played. They're also required to wear a mask to and from the field. Game schedules will be more spread out. Game day operations, where we have staff, we will be wearing masks. We will have gloves when we're picking up trash or sanitizing equipment. There will be no pregame coin toss. Home team chooses direction. We're encouraging people not to provide benches. It's really kind of interesting, because a comment that's been made is like, well, where are the kids supposed to sit? And I always just think to myself, and I'll be 48 this month. I just remember we never had benches either. We had to sit on the ground. So I think it's okay. The reason why we're recommending not to have benches is because benches will promote people sitting closer to each other. So the intent here is to try to maintain more social distance by having the kids a little bit more spread out. You'll see here, no pre or post game handshakes. What we also are recommending too is pop-up tents may be used, but we're recommending teams bring their own. So if you go play in a tournament or you're used to things being provided, don't expect that, because if you provide them, you've got to sanitize them. And that's a lot of walking around and people touching things. So the expectation should be teams bring their own, and probably should bring at least 2, because that will promote more distancing and more social distancing to give everybody more space. But we're recommending people not provide pop-ups. Sanitization, game balls, signage, goalposts, corner flags, etc. Now for us, what we've done is we went and bought those big backpack carriers, like when you're spraying your weeds at your house. And we also have the bleach and the cleaners. My staff, relative to ASA managed leagues, will go around 3 or 4 times a day, spraying off all signage, spraying down goalposts, etc. The other thing that we're recommending against is out-of-state travel. We are not going to put a travel ban in place. We're not going to tell people not to travel, but we're going to encourage people not to travel out of state. Robert, I see your question on what metrics have informed moving to phase 3. I'll share that here in just a minute. So got all kinds of things for you. Unless you're asking about the metrics moving to step 3 in this group where we have no restrictions, that will be determined. And I'll talk a little bit about metrics here in just a moment, some of the things we have in place and what we found. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Step 2, we allow spectators. Families will just be socially distant, need to wear a mask at all times. And then obviously when we get to step 3, it will be no restrictions. So I'll talk about metrics and how we move to these things in each point. Okay. Now, one of the things, yes, Stephanie, I'll touch on that here in just a moment as well. So one of the things that people ask frequently, and rightfully so, is, okay, Rick, so you do all this stuff. What are your data sources? How are you actually manipulating or managing the data and understanding how to read the data? So what I use is the Arizona Department of Public Health, their COVID-19 dashboard, as well as the recently developed business operations dashboard. And I'll show you each of those. I use the R0 value and the RT.live site. I use US Soccer's Play On Guidelines, CDC, the Dutch Football Association, and I'll show you a study they had performed. Also talking with the Arizona Department of Child Services. We also talk very frequently to other state associations around the country that are back to play. Utah Youth Soccer has been playing since May. They've had over 5,000 games. North Texas, Iowa's back playing as well. Our weekly phone calls. I also speak quite a bit with Rini Ochoa at Keno Sports Complex. So there's many, many other conversations I have. and we're a part of lots and lots of different groups. I talk to all the different executive directors around the country. What are their states doing? What are the things they're finding out? So we've really tried to be as thorough as we can as far as understanding what people are doing, how they're doing it, best practices, and so forth. Now, to jump into some of these data, one of the questions that we get oftentimes as we look at this is, well, if kids can't go to school, how can you possibly play soccer? And my response is very, very simple and very direct. There is a big difference between putting 30 kids in a 400 square foot classroom and 30 kids on a full-size 64,000 square foot soccer field outdoors. They're not the same. And so that by itself really promotes the fact that you're outside. The fact that the game of soccer inherently promotes social distancing. It allows for us and affords us different opportunities than you would in a classroom, regardless of where anybody stands on classrooms. And please know as well, none of the comments I'm making tonight are political in nature or have opinions one way or another there. The other study we looked at was the one done by the Dutch Football Association, as you can see here. Now, I don't know the metric system, so I had to convert everything to something that's very American in feet. But you'll see here, what they found is that a soccer player spends less than 34 seconds per game within 6 feet of another player. So the game inherently promotes social distancing. Now, I'm sure many people will make the comment, well, there's different things for different ages. Absolutely. Nothing is going to be 100% one way or another. And we do also have small size fields. Okay, so we recognize that, but also those numbers shrink dramatically. The point of this is just to highlight the fact that we are not school. We also are not college, the Pac-12, which is another question that we'll get asked, or I'm sure somebody here will ask is, well, if the Pac-12 can't go back to play, how can Arizona soccer? And again, it's not the same, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Things you have to keep in mind when you look at colleges specifically. First off, while it may be great that the football team could put 100 people on a chartered flight and fly them to wherever their game may be and keep them in a bus and put them in a hotel and kind of semi-bubble them, you can't do the same for volleyball. You're not doing the same for women's soccer. You're not doing the same for the wrestling team. They're going to drive. They're going to go into an airport. They're going to fly somewhere. They're going to take public transportation or rent some vehicles, and they're going to be at restaurants and what have you. The amount of exposure that those college athletes are getting compared to being able to play soccer in your own home state, traveling with your parents typically, going to and from the game is not the same risk level as all the things I just mentioned, plus bringing 20,000 kids from all over the country onto campus. So recognizing that, those are not necessarily fair comparisons to be able to make. I won't say there's no comparison to make because we do still need to be thoughtful about what transmission may or may not look like. How do we maintain as much social distancing and drive and implement as many of the precautions that we're aware of as possible? That absolutely does exist every single time. Okay, next slide. So looking at some of the data itself, this is the data as of today. You can see down here in the bottom, it's as of 8/17/2020. On the left, you'll see Arizona. On the right, you'll see Pima County. Now, you can see at a state level, we are seeing a significant decline in number of cases. As a matter of fact, today they announced there was only 496 new cases. Now, anybody that's been following the data very close will know that the data is always a little bit lower on Mondays, just the way the data works. You will see here Pima County also is following the same trend, a little bit leveled out. This number here is very interesting to me, the 638. And the reason why it's interesting is because last week it was 455. And I could show you screenshots that show that. So in 15 days, somehow, something 2 weeks ago. So it really does highlight the fact that the data collection sometimes has its own inherent challenges, but nonetheless, it is what it is. And you can see those declines across both. Now, again, I would also say when I say the declines, while you can see a very sharp decline here in the state level, it does somewhat flatten out here in Maricopa County, or correction, Pima County, sorry. Looking at the next, which is our cases, this is the case count, and specifically in the demographics. The demographics that matter to me and that I continue to look at come in this space here when you start looking at where the case counts fall. 20 years and younger represents right about 12% of the total cases. When you come over here into Pima County, it's about the same, but you can see here where that 20 to 44-year-old age group, which represents a large percentage of our parents, is significantly higher than any other demographic in any other age group. Now, there are some things to call out, and that's a 20-year span versus everything else being a 10-year span. So there are some nuances, I think, to that data that would be nice to see. It can be. So that's how this is what we're seeing as far as that 20 to 44-year-old age group and making the decision on no spectators. And just to answer a question, just to look over here just a second real fast. If Pima County Health Department still maintains no gatherings of 10 or more, how is this phase appropriate for Pima County teams? I've not seen that because I know Keno Sports Complex, where we play a lot of the games, are continuous to play right now. I have to look that up. When I looked at the data today from Pima County Health Department, the numbers didn't even match the state. They were lower. So I'd have to look at that.
Rick, let me jump in here real quick on this, if I could. So Pima County has specifically taken the question of youth sports to the medical director in Pima County. And the medical director, in conjunction with Chuck Huckleberry, issued a clarification of the order about 10 or few people. And it basically and specifically addressed youth soccer. And the gist of it is that they concluded that youth soccer can appropriately be played with minimal risk. They require essentially the same things that ASA requires in terms of wearing masks to and from the field. They don't require the mask be worn while you're playing, except if you're on a corner kick or a free kick, where in a situation where you might be standing within 6 foot of somebody for more than 30 seconds or so, then they want you to be able to pull up your gaiter or pull up your mask. That's basically the rule. And they specifically talked about youth soccer and what you can and can't do. So, and those are the guidelines that we've been following. So, end of that.
Thank you. Looking also at the data, this is the new dashboard that the state of Arizona, the Department of Health put out. There's a similar one for schools, but this is for business reopening. And what you'll see here is what it takes for 2 consecutive weeks to understand substantial transmission, moderate transmission, or minimal transmission. And I've also pulled the Pima County. Now you can see here for the state, the trends have gone down. In the cases per 100,000, we're looking to get under 100. The positivity rate, you can see a steep decline here, and the percentage of hospital visits for COVID-like illnesses. And then you can see it also over here in Pima County. I do believe that this 145 and this jump in cases per 100,000 is significant, correlates directly to that outlier in number of cases that's continued to grow. I believe that was around August 1st. So you can see that these numbers are trending in the positive direction, and we'll see where this comes out. Is this because these are lagging metrics? But when you ask what are the metrics that we're looking at to justify the movement of things, this is all that we're looking at. The additional thing we're looking at is Arizona's R0 score. So R0, if you're not familiar with this, the R0 score is the value and the score that they're using to measure spread. Anything less than 1 means that you're controlling the spread, and the spread is stopping. Arizona has actually been in first place for probably the last 10 days, except for one. Maine beat us for one day, and we are right now at a 0.79. And you can see these trends. This is when we spiked back up, and then you can see when we started going back down and how we've continued to trend down as a state. So again, one of the things when you talk about Arizona Soccer Association as a whole is we're trying to look at things as much as we can at a state level, but also taking the time to understand what's happening in the individual community in which our families live. Now, something I want to share as I go into the next steps, I mentioned that we also talked to the Arizona Department of Child Safety. a lot of people will make a comment to me and say, hey, you know what, Rick, what are you going to do about all of the kids that take it back to their grandparents in the multi-generational homes, which is absolutely a concern and something we think about. My wife's grandparents lived with us for the last 6 years up until her grandfather passed away about a year ago. So as I showed you my family picture, I understand that aspect as well. But we've also got to recognize, and I'll ask everybody to appreciate, is of the 45,000 kids we have playing for us, not all of them come from good homes. Not all of them are in good situations. And so we also did talk to the Arizona Department of Child Safety, the director there, Mike Faust. And one of the things he talked about was, I believe the number he said was the number of calls into the child abuse hotline was down 90%. And so he gave us this quote just to kind of help support what their position is as well. And I'll just read it to you. With kids currently unable to attend in-person school, it is important that they be able to participate in structured organizations that promote social, emotional, and physical development and security. ASA is a recognized community organization that requires all members to complete and pass a background check, as well as complete Safe Sports certification, which provides training to coaches and volunteers in identifying and reporting signs of physical and sexual abuse. Keeping kids in the public view is critical in helping to keep them safe. I will share with you guys, we get anywhere from 6 to 12 Safe Sport reports every single season. Our coaches and our clubs are key and are a huge part of protecting the kids as well. Now, I share this with you not because we're going to solve child abuse by playing soccer, or fix that whole problem, but no more than we're going to solve that can I solve the issues with taking it home to your multi-generational families. But with the controls we've put in place and with the commitment of the clubs and you guys as parents and the coaches and the players and the community, we can influence both in a way that's productive for everybody. And so that's a big part of it. So some of our next steps, we announced today, phase 4 in the return to play guidelines. We finalized the return to competition guidelines. We're continuing to partner with leagues statewide on the implementation of these, and I'll speak to those here in a minute. We're continuing to partner with local municipalities, counties, and state facilities, coaching education. Our upcoming events include our Scrimmage Fest and Advanced League Play-In games, which is this weekend. Will be played in Maricopa. We have our ODP tryouts in Casa Grande, August 28th and 29th. That actually may be the 29th and 30th, whatever Saturday and Sunday is. For some reason, that weekend and those 2 dates on that weekend are just tearing me up. And then we'll kick off the Arizona Federal Credit Union Advanced Leagues and the Max in Motion Open League. And that will be mid-September. So that's where we're at today. Now, there's a couple of questions that talked about other protocols if someone on the team or the household gets ill and so forth. And the answer is yes. On our website, we published it today. We've provided and we vetted it through the Arizona Department of Health, what the expectations are for an individual if they are exposed, to have contact exposure, if they have symptoms, or if there's a positive test. Couple of things to understand. Close contact exposure, I'll just give you a high level of each one of these. Close contact exposure will require that individual to be self-quarantined for 14 days. And close contact exposure is defined both by the CDC and on our website. If they have symptoms, so if a player on Ted's team has symptoms, then the entire team will quarantine for 14 days or until that player's results or that individual's results come back as a negative. So if I'm on Ted's team and I have, symptoms and I'm having headaches and cough and shortness of breath, I report that I have those symptoms of COVID, then what I'll do is I'll tell Ted as my coach, the team will stop all activities for 14 days, or once I get a test, if the test comes back negative, they go back to playing, no problem. But they have to now quarantine for 14 days. That's per the Department of Health and CDC guidelines. You always go with the assumption symptoms are assumed positive unless you're told it's negative. And I think everybody can probably understand that from that perspective. So some things that we're going to have to be aware of. And we're meeting with tournament directors this week on Wednesday for the second or third time in the last month. If you find out on a Thursday, you may have to pull out of a tournament. What's the tournament going to do? If you find out during a tournament, maybe it's one of your opponents. So there's a number of of things in that space that are defined on our website. We couldn't get it in the communications we put out because it just becomes like so much information you can't really digest it all. But that's all available on our website, as well as that graphic I showed you a moment ago. Okay, so let me make sure I've answered everybody's questions on here. I think I have. You know, the question around what metrics were informed, and here's a question somebody I'm sure will ask us. This could change. And that's the one thing I'll ask everybody and let you guys all know. While we say this is what we're going to do, not for nothing, tomorrow could change it. You know, people asked me early on, and back in April, they said, what are you going to do in September? I was like, let's just get to May, right? If I knew what I knew today, I probably could not have predicted yesterday. And that's kind of how we've handled it. And that's why I made the comment early on about the fact that we don't have, nothing in my professional career has prepared me for anything like this. It's constant change. It's constantly new information. The virus itself, we've learned, I mean, we've legitimately all watched this and we have our perspectives. I will tell you, my staff has been impacted as well because we get accused of that all the time. Somebody will always tell me, well, if you just saw what this really did to people. We've been a part of it. We're just like everybody else, but we are confident. And you should be confident in your club's leadership, your club's engagement, as well as what we've done and working with the municipalities as best we can to provide as safe an environment as we possibly can, also recognizing there's no way to eliminate all risk. So that being said, I will take a big, long breath. And let me see, there's a couple questions up here as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this real quick just so we can all see each other. Let me take a look at this. Will negative rapid test be adequate, or will PCR be required? The PCR is more sensitive and rapid tests will, we're looking for a negative test. When you ask about negative tests though, Jeff, what specifically are you asking for? Around that, I mean, are you asking when we said if they're 14 days or if they get a negative test? Is that what you're speaking of?
Yeah, so you said that if a player has a negative test, then the team can return to play before the 14 days is up if a player is symptomatic. But the rapid tests that are going to be done in offices and are going to be much more available over the next few months, we'll miss a lot more cases than PCR, so we'll get false negatives.
Well, so I'll answer that in a couple of ways. So first off, you know, we've all read various numbers, and one of the numbers I read said that the number of infected people is anywhere from 6 times to 24 times what we know about. So if I just went with 6 times, you know, we take roughly 4 million. That means 24 million people are infected by it that don't even realize it. And then if you take the fact that roughly that any of the tests are only 70 to 80% accurate anyways, I think we're pretty much in a position of not being able to come back and put any scientific value behind any one of them. I'm not. And when I say scientific value, I'm talking, I don't have that expertise. We're going to trust that people get the test, they go to their doctor, the doctor administers what they feel is appropriate for their patient, and that's the result we have. We deal with, I mean, we have the same issues on concussions. Right? Did this doctor actually do the same test the other doctor did? So that those types of things, as far as that goes, if they provide a test result back from a medical professional and from a provider, then that's all we can ask for. The question around maybe it should be addressed to local health officials, but hopefully ASA will not mandate gator masks. We're not making any specific mask mandatory or not. I learned about the Duke study today. Again, guys, there's so many studies that come out, and I mean, legitimately, what was it? Probably about 6 or 8 weeks ago, the World Health Organization came out on a Monday and said, children that, or if you're asymptomatic, you can't spread it. And on Tuesday, they said, oh, our bad, you really can. This is such an evolving situation. I think what we have to be mindful of when you look at the masks specifically is the masks are intended to be safety mechanisms and add to helping to minimize the risk. Not eliminating the risk. I don't know that any one single study, I'm not a medical expert, reading one single study by Duke, because I'm sure I could probably go out there and find a study that tells me why these other ones aren't good enough either. So I think as it comes to that, we'll continue to be mindful. I will share with you though, across the board, nationally, across all NGBs, NGB being national governing bodies. So that would be US Soccer, USA Baseball, USA Basketball, gymnastics, and so forth, and the US Olympic Committee. They're working right now to put together a letter advising that nobody should play any sport with a mask on, because it limits oxygen intake and a whole bunch of things that I'm not qualified to really touch on. So that's being addressed at a national level as well. The next question, Stephanie, you asked the question, so does the household need to be symptom-free for 14 days or have a negative test before they come back if a household member has previously been tested positive? Just that individual. So if it's if I test positive and my son is on Ted's team, my son has to be self-quarantined for 14 days, not the entire team. And nor do we have to have the negative test. When I spoke to the Department of Health as recently as Friday, they said the challenge with any type of negative test is it only measures that day and that moment. And even though you could actually have overcome the virus as far as the illness, but still be positive for some 60 days beyond that because you have a dead virus, but it's still there. So they said not to use negative tests as any type of a benchmark for returning to play. The only time we're using a negative test for anything is if somebody says, I have symptoms, and we need to find out if those symptoms are truly COVID or maybe they're just seasonal allergies. So because the symptoms are so broad, that's the only time, but a return to play is not done by a negative test. So our next question, hello, my question is, I tested positive for COVID. I'll come back to that one. Doctors that allow to test are actually not recommended at all. Just be symptom-free. Correct. So yeah, just so everybody knows, if you look at our guidelines as well, and what the CDC says is after you're positive, they're not even recommending to do negative tests afterwards. The CDC guidelines actually on their website say 10 days after the onset of symptoms and and no fever for 24 hours without using any medicine and other symptoms have improved, then you could return. So there's no more go get a negative test, or if you're positive, wait 14 days. It's once you've gone 10 days from the onset of them and you no longer have a fever without using medicine for at least 24 hours and you have other symptoms have improved. Now I have read a couple of things today that I haven't got confirmation because it's not on the CDC website that 24 hours of no fever is now actually 72. But again, that's how fast things are changing. Are there specific numbers within the metrics ASA is looking for to move within phase 4? No, not specifically, because we just never know what's going to happen. So right now we're going to start off in step 1, which is no spectators. That's really the biggest point to put out. And we will move to step 2. If the governor were to change it and increase the number of people allowed at a single event, then we can make that change as well. Otherwise, we'll also use those business scorecards, dashboards, to see how that is moving as far as whether or not we allow spectators. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of real talk. The real talk is in youth sports, parents are our biggest problem. One of our biggest challenges with doing this is on this returning to play, and this has been a consistent concern across the board from anybody I've talked to. It's not whether or not we allow parents. It's the parent that wants to argue their constitutional right that they get to wear a mask or don't have to wear a mask, and they're there and they can do whatever they want. That's the problem. And none of us have the time, energy, or patience to try to come up with all these things for the kids, try to do everything we can around that, and sit and have a constitutional argument whether or not you should or should not wear a mask. These are our rules. This is what we're going to put forth, and that's what we want you to do, and what we really hope we can do. And many of you have probably seen this quote by Winston Churchill, don't waste a good crisis. Most all of us here, and myself 100%, have sat on the sideline during one of our kids' games or another friend's game or what have you, and watched that one parent act like a jerk. And we legitimately looked over and said, that parent's a jerk. Yet the other 14 of us did nothing about the jerk. We need all 14 now to get the 15th in line. That's what we have to start doing. If we want to make this different, because what's going to happen is they will rip the fields away from us. I will tell you guys, I am working my tail off to get fields. We have a lobbyist. I've got letter writing campaigns. We're working on a petition right now. I'm talking at Flagstaff City Council meeting tomorrow night. I've been at the Mesa City Council meeting. I've talked to Pima County. I mean, we're doing everything we can to help get fields available. If parents want to screw it up, we're going to enforce them all the way out into the parking lot. So please help us in that space. So hopefully I answered that question for you, Krista. College and professional athletes are being tested multiple times. Why are we not testing our youth? You can. I just don't have an endless budget. I don't have millions of dollars in resources at our hands to do the same thing. So you absolutely can test your children as much as you feel is appropriate. I will share with you that we are talking with Banner Sports Medicine, as they are a partner of Arizona Soccer Association. We're trying to work some things out, but the reality of it is there's no way we can build any testing protocols in place to support testing of 45,000 youth to play soccer. We're putting these other controls in place we feel are appropriate. And that's the way that's what we're going to continue focusing on, and we'll adjust as we need to, or as we're required to. Another question, I may have missed this, but with 22 girls on a team, some distancing, some not, how do you propose mitigating the risk? If it's not safe for 22 girls to go to school, I think I touched on that a little bit ago, Sly. So, again, going to school in a classroom that's 400 square feet is not the same as being out on a soccer field outside. Studies and consistently, even though we hear all kinds of contradictory studies and commentary, studies have continued to state that being outside reduces risk dramatically. With the right protocols and with the discipline that we should be showing, we're in a good position. I think what we have, we have good discipline so far. I will share with you guys, when we launched the first return to play guidelines, we meet with the club directors every single week. They wanted some way to hold them accountable. So we developed a policy. And the policy was, if you violate any one of these, the return to play guidelines, whatever phase we're in, and the ASA staff were to see this, not all of the pictures because let me tell you guys, I get plenty of pictures and videos and everybody telling on everybody else. We actually fined 3 clubs for violating the return to play guidelines. And it was $500 each club. Now that may not seem a lot for some clubs, it's a ton of money for other clubs, but it's something that the clubs demanded. And that's why I say, I think I would definitely encourage you guys, have confidence in your club that they really are trying to do the right things. They're very, very engaged in what's happening. And they've given a lot of very, very good feedback. Our process as we've gone through this entire thing, for everything we've done, we've put together our recommendation. We present it to the directors of coaches to make sure that's something they feel like they can enforce, because I'm sure, many of you have jobs and have careers and have been in places where you got somebody up here just dictating how you're going to do stuff, but they can't have any way to implement it. So we work very closely with the club directors. We've shared it with club presidents. We talk to tournament directors to make sure that what we're providing is a framework that people feel they can achieve. We are doing everything in our power not to set up anybody to fail. Any other questions? I think I hopefully if I've missed anybody's questions here in the chat, just post it again and I can go back to it. I think I've hit everybody's.
Okay, guys, well, listen, Rick, thank you once again for taking the time to do this. And if you haven't figured out from listening to him, I'll tell you, he's accessible. So if you think of something, you want to talk to him, you want to get more information, he answers his emails. Continue to engage, because information is power. And when we know, what's going on and why it's going on, and we're doing the best we can, and there's a real solid basis to support it, I think that should give us all a lot more confidence that, we're doing the right thing. So if there aren't any other comments or questions, I'm going to.
One just popped up, Ted. It says, so when are youth going to be able to play again? Now. We're in phase 4. We've opened everything back up. They can play. The only requirements are step 1, which is essentially no spectators at their games. And guys, when we talk about no spectators, I want to be really clear on something. Again, we need your help. But you're going to go to some fields where, and I'm sure many of you guys have been to Reach 11 at some point in time. You'll go to some fields and your kids are set up on a field right next to the sidewalk, right next to the parking lot. You are golden. You can watch them. but there's a family that can't see field 3. Okay. And that stinks. So when you're the family that's in field 3, just know that that stinks. When you're the one on field 2, think how awesome it is that you can sit on that sidewalk or in that parking lot and see the game. But please help us in making sure we help each other get through the rest of this, so we not just get back to play, but we keep playing. We don't want to stop again. There's nothing going to be worse for our kids than to stop again. We've taken so much away over the last 6 months, and so many have struggled. We want to make sure we keep this going in the right direction. There's another question here. When can tournaments begin? The first tournament is scheduled, I believe the first sanctioned tournament is Labor Day weekend. So they're set as far as that goes. And as far as I know, they're playing. I know there's some challenges on some fields and some field situations, but tournaments are now there. There's one here, Ted, for you and or your staff. I know what ASA has given the go ahead for phase 4. Does that mean FCT is jumping into that phase as well?
The answer is yes.
And then
Absolutely.
Krista asks, I am assuming the spectators applies to practices as well, and I'll just answer that for you guys and say yes. Just save Ted from having to answer that one. In terms of setup, can volunteers help with tents and then leave the field? Sure. I mean, I think that's something that the club will manage accordingly. One of the things you guys will also notice as we put these guidelines out, I'm sure many of you also participate in PCJSL. As we set these rules and these steps, these are the guidelines, but we also recognize that community-based leagues may have to do some other things and tweaks to serve what they need to do. So while we're doing things at a state level, we do recognize community-based leagues may have some different tweaks they may have to make. To give an example of that, in Yavapai, Prescott, they don't have to wear masks at all. So again, a little bit different in different places. So local leagues will have a little bit of flexibility to do what they need to do as well. Hopefully you as parents will see a consistent experience no matter where your child plays, whether it's PCJSL, advanced leagues, hopefully within the ECNL structure or any of those as well, and as you go to tournaments.
I want to speak to this for just a minute because if you've been out to any of the FC Tucson practices, you've seen that we really appreciate and respect the fact that parents are being as cooperative with that as they can be. That we know that not all the teams out there, or not all the clubs out there are complying. And that's sad because the county, for sure, I can tell you, because I'm in communication with them regularly, are watching very carefully, and they're very grateful of the job we're doing. But we really need to encourage everybody in our community to follow these rules, because if they don't, they're going to ruin it for everybody. The county wants to do the right thing. They've enacted very specific regulations, protocols for us to follow through the medical director, and we're following those, and they're consistent, completely consistent with what ASA is announcing. I just think the only difference is the ASA information we got tonight is probably more specific. There's more scenarios being contemplated that we're going to know what to do a little bit better, and we're of course going to adopt all that. So any other questions?
Yeah, Ted, there's another one here. One would be for you. You said no parents are allowed to watch practice. You can watch practice, just not go to the field. So I believe FC Tucson is keeping everybody off the field in a way that allows it to just be coaches and players, similar to what you would see when you go to watch any of the games.
So if you're at Rieto, you can sit in those bleachers off in the parking lot, and you can watch the practice from that parking lot. If you're at Brandy Fenton, then you need to stay outside the fence. But your parents have been doing a great job on all of this. We haven't had any problems at all.
Yeah, now I'll share with you guys. I was talking to Rini Ochoa at Keno Sports Complex, and she because again they've had baseball tournaments and there's events going all around the state. We are not actually, to be honest, guys, we are the last sport to get back to any type of level of competition. So many people have said, what's wrong with you guys? I'm just going to go, wow. But she was telling me that where they don't allow spectators, an unintended consequence of that, people have cut holes in many of their fences so they can see the game. So again, please don't be that parent. Please be respectful of property. Another question here. One concern I have is kids on opposing teams coughing or spitting on others to intimidate. We have talked to the state referee committee, and what we've discussed is making that a straight red card. We are not in a position to be sensitive to those things. And when I say sensitive, not sensitive if somebody's ill or sick, but more sensitive to somebody acting like a knucklehead. So we have to be far more specific there. It says, like tents, can a remote field camera assembly, text with mask following social distance, be set up to stream a game? So here's how we're addressing this. We've had a couple of questions similar to this one. Also, we had a team call and say that, hey, we have a child that is an epileptic. Mom or dad have to be there, or asthmatic, and mom and dad have to be there. So here's how it's really simple. What we've advised is in ours, and I believe PCJSL is the same way, you can have up to 4 team officials in the technical area. That what we've advised the team to do is make sure that that parent, or in this case, whoever's going to be doing your filming is a team official, which means they submit through Arizona Soccer Association, they get background checked, they get Safe Sport certified, they get a pass issued, and then they're a team official, just like the coach, just like the team manager, and that counts as one of your 4 team officials in the technical area. Here's something that's going to be very interesting over especially the next 90 days, 3 months. Clubs are going to have to manage their staff. They're going to have to manage their resources, whether it be volunteers, coaches, including parents. So when we say there's only 4 in the technical area, they've got to figure out who those 4 are. When they say you can only have, if this coach, so let's say Ted is a coach and he winds up having to go into quarantine and he coaches 3 other teams, the club's going to have to figure out how those other 3 teams get a coach. Okay, we've recognized that if a team goes into quarantine, we do not have any expectations that team's going to forfeit every game for the next 2 weeks. Again, tournaments are different. That's a different ball of wax, but league play. But if Ted were to be that one and the team that he's the primary coach on, and then 3 more teams, we can't reschedule all of these teams all the time. So there's going to be a lot of onus on clubs to effectively manage their resources in a way that supports the kids playing the game as much as possible. There's another question. I think that at Relito, we are allowed to sit in the bleachers. We don't have to, yes, you can sit in the bleachers. That's what was shared. So Relito, you can sit in the bleachers to watch practice from there. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, so about the mask,
Okay, next question. So if there's nothing else, I want to, again, first and foremost, thank you guys. Right, again, Arizona Soccer Association, we are a service organization. There's often times, and Ted's been through many of these debates with us as well, who are the parents a customer of? The club or Arizona Soccer Association? And the answer is yes. Our job has to be to support you guys as well. And our job has to be to make sure we take care of our members, which are the clubs also. As Ted mentioned, we want to be as accessible as we can. We want our organization to have a face. We want you to feel like you're part of something more than just a club. We want you part of our community. If there's things that we can do, please let us know. If you have feedback, please let me know. I don't know it all. I'm going to be very, very, again, very transparent with you. I'm not a public health expert. I shared you my background. I care about what we do in Arizona. I want us to be thoughtful. We won't always get it right. And as long as you guys can always respect our responses and hopefully trust that we're going to give you as honest a response as we can, we will do our level best to respond to your questions. What we won't do, just so you guys know, me or my staff, we will not debate it electronically. Nobody wins. You'll notice anytime there's comments made, we're very careful unless it's rude, crude, or demeaning in some way. We try to be very responsible about our social media platform. And if somebody puts a negative comment, we don't just hide it to make it seem like everybody's loving what we're doing. So we want to be responsible that way. But if somebody does put a negative comment, typically I'll just call them to have the conversation, because I'm sure everybody here can appreciate no war is ever going to be won on social media. So we're happy to have any conversation. You can set up time. My emails are out there, my phone number, but I can't thank you guys enough for getting 90 plus people on a call on a Monday evening. So I love Zoom. Ted, Walter, anything else? Roberto, anything else you need from me tonight? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Rick. Good
Thanks,
night,
Rick.
everyone.
Good night, guys.
Thanks.